the architect of reality. Daniel used to design buildings, structures that stood tall, unshakable, unbreakable. But the mind isn't made of steel and concrete. It bends, shifts, warps, and sometimes it fractures. Schizophrenia doesn't arrive like a storm all at once. It creeps in like cracks in a foundation, small at first, unnoticed, until one day, everything caves in. This is the story of a man losing himself, one piece at a time. The whisper in the walls, paranoid schizophrenia. The first time Daniel heard the voice, he was at his drafting table, sketching the framework for a new skyscraper. It was a whisper just behind his ear, so quiet it could have been his own thoughts. They're watching you. He looked over his shoulder. No one was there. At first, it was easy to dismiss, just exhaustion, stress. But then he started noticing things, his colleagues exchanging glances when he walked by, their conversations stopping just as he entered the room. Or maybe they weren't. He couldn't be sure anymore. Paranoia is a slow burn. It starts with doubt, then spirals into certainty. The mind stitches together unrelated events, turning them into a pattern, a conspiracy. The world isn't just indifferent anymore, it's hostile. Then one night, he found a sketch left on his desk, an idea identical to his own. He hadn't written it down, he hadn't told anyone. His hands trembled. They're inside my head now. The next morning, he quit. The maze of his mind, disorganized schizophrenia. At first, it felt like freedom. No more deadlines, no more stolen ideas. He had time to work on something bigger, but soon, time itself unraveled. One day, Adam visited. Daniel tried to explain his latest project, his most ambitious yet. He spoke faster, trying to connect the ideas, but they kept slipping, breaking apart mid-sentence. "You're not making sense, man." Daniel blinked. He was making sense. The patterns were obvious, weren't they? Thoughts, once structured like his blueprints, now scattered like torn-up sketches. Words tumbled out, disconnected, slipping through the cracks of a mind losing its grip. Stillness and storms, catatonic schizophrenia. The apartment became his world. Papers covered the floor, covered the walls. He didn't need an office. He was working on something beyond their understanding. And then one day, he stopped. He sat motionless at his desk, his body frozen mid-thought, mid-action. He wanted to move, but he couldn't. Time passed, hours, days. The city shifted beyond the window, but Daniel remained. And then, as if breaking free, he lurched into motion. He had to move, now. He paced for hours, mumbling, his hands shaking, knocking over furniture. The human body reflects the mind's chaos. Catatonia isn't just stillness, it's extremes. The brain locks up like a broken machine, only to burst into motion with no control, no rhythm. Outside, the world carried on. Inside, Daniel was trapped in his own momentum. A mind without borders, undifferentiated schizophrenia. By now, the boundaries between reality and delusion blurred beyond recognition. Some days he still heard whispers, warning him of unseen dangers. Other times, he found himself explaining things to people who weren't there, his words a tangled mess of thoughts. He no longer fit into one category, his symptoms shifting like sand. Not just paranoia, not just disorganized thought, not just catatonia, but pieces of them all. Schizophrenia doesn't always follow the rules. Some minds don't fit neatly into definitions. They drift between realities, caught in an ever-changing storm. And Daniel was lost in it. The hollow echo, residual schizophrenia. The last time Adam saw him, it had been years. Daniel was quieter now, slower. The wild energy was gone, but so was the light behind his eyes. His clothes were neat, his voice softer, but there was something missing. "How have you been?" Adam asked. Daniel thought for a long time before answering. Better. There was no paranoia anymore, no frantic ideas, no bursts of energy. The storm had passed, but in its place was a silence, an emptiness. Schizophrenia doesn't always end in chaos. Sometimes it fades into the background, leaving behind a person who is almost who they used to be. Almost. Adam wanted to believe him. But when he looked into Daniel's eyes, he realized the man he once knew was already gone.